Hello and welcome to this new video. This one is about the bus processor from Softube, and this one is one of my favorites besides my SSL compressor. And at first, let's start with the track, and I switched the plugin on and off so you can hear the difference. I used it on my drum bus here, so have a listen. Yes, the difference is not that big. It's more with the snare drum and especially the high end, and not that much with the low end. It's not too overcompressed. And let's start with the main three sections of the plugin, which is the spatial processing. Then we have the compression, of course, and also we have saturation. And what I really like about this plugin is we have mix knobs for the compression and for the saturation. So you can change the amount of the dry signal here. And for the compression, I have around 36% of the dry signal. And for the saturation, I have around 48% of the dry signal. And also we have a sidechain area here. So I didn't touch the stereo link, but I used the Sidechain Low Cut at around 100 Hertz, which means everything below 100 Hertz doesn't affect the compressor that much. And I also didn't use the tone shift. And with the saturation, I used just a little bit of saturation and a little bit of the tone shift, a little bit of the treble side, not on the dark side. And yeah, and what I also really like is the spatial section here. So we have a really nice sounding air band. It's like a very high frequency shimmerish air band. It sounds really nice, and I'll show you this in a minute. And I also used a little bit of the width settings, but be careful with this one. You can really destroy your stereo image with this one. I used it just a little bit. And also we have a mono bass feature here, and I set it around 60 Hertz, which is a pretty standard setting, to be honest. Now let's talk about the compressor settings here, and these are, let's say, pretty standard and classic bus compression settings, very general settings, and I used a ratio of 2:1, and I always set my threshold for bus compression, so I have a gain reduction between 2 and 4 dB. And I didn't use the makeup gain here, and I'll show you why in a minute. And I used the attack time of 20 milliseconds and a relatively hard knee, the full range. And with the release time, it's interesting here. So you can choose between, let's say, pretty classic standard millisecond values here, but also we have the DAW button. And now the release is tempo sync with our project. In my case, it's 120 BPM. But you can also choose the note values here. So we can choose whole notes. And then, of course, we have a relatively slow compression or a slow release. But we can go up to 16 notes. And then, of course, we have a pretty fast release time. And for this project, I really like the 8-note setting here. So it's a good middle way. And to be honest, I like this setting a little bit more than the auto release. I mean, they are pretty similar, but I like the 8-note setting a little bit more. And yeah, that's it for the compression settings. And now I turn some knobs, and so you can really hear the difference. And let's start with the air band here. Interesting is, even with the settings at 10 here, it doesn't sound too aggressive or not that harsh. It still sounds very gentle and shimmerish. So let's bring in the other instruments so we can find a good balance here. Yeah, that sounds good to me, and as I said before, I really love this air bands here. It sounds really nice in the high end. And with the stereo riff setting, as I said before, you can really destroy your stereo image. So let's solo the drums again, and I'll show you some extreme settings. Now everything moves to the sides here, but you also can choose everything in the middle, in the center. And again, I like this setting at around 110%, which sounds really nice for me. And again, the mono bass at around 60 Hz. Yeah, this is a pretty standard setting for me. And now let's talk about the Sidechain Low Cut setting here, and pay attention how the kick drum affects the gain reduction here. And now I turn this down to 0. And now you can see the kick drum heavily affects the compressor here, or let's say the very low frequencies of the kick drum. That's why I like this setting at around, let's say, sometimes 80 Hz or 100. And let's set it to 100. So everything below 100 doesn't affect the compressor that much. And with this setting, the compressor is affected more by the snare drum. And as I said before, this is a pretty gentle bass compression setting, and let's make it a little bit more extreme so you can hear the difference better. So let's start with the mix knob, and we set it to 0% dry. And now let's change the ratio to 4:1. Let's type this in here. Now we have a pretty heavy compression, and to be honest, these are drum samples, and for me now it's a little bit too much compression, so they sound a little bit over compressed, at least in my opinion. And the thing is, with drum samples, sometimes they need a little bit of compression. It depends on the whole mix, but sometimes they don't need any compression at all. And if you have natural drum recordings, of course maybe you need more compression. It depends on your source material and your whole mix. So let's bring in the other instruments again and let's see if we can find a good balance here. Yeah, and I like this setting very much. It's pretty similar to the setting I showed you before. And another thing I want to show you is we have 3 different buttons here, which means with the Softube plugins, we can add a left section here. And here we have the input gain and an external sidechain and also an high and low cut, which is really handy if you need it. And on the bottom here, we have the headroom, we have the high pass, and also a phase invert, which is also really handy if you need it. And the white panel here, I use it all the time, because here we have a gain match feature. And I know some people say you don't need it, don't gain match all the time. For me, it's pretty handy to have, so you don't fool yourself with just a louder signal. So let's try this out here. And how this works with the plugin is you just play the track and then I hit this button here a few times and the plugin automatically matches the levels. And of course, don't go too crazy with this one. It doesn't need to be exactly 100% the same levels, just a rough value so we can have a proper comparison. And the last thing I want to show you is the saturation, a few more extreme settings. So let's solo the drums again and let's change the mix knob of the saturation to 0% dry, so 100% wet. And let's go a little bit crazy with these settings here. You can also change the position of the saturation before decompression or after decompression. And here we have the tone shift, so you can choose, I think you can choose how the saturation affects more the lower frequencies or more the higher frequencies. And here you clearly hear the saturation almost distorts the lower frequencies. So let's choose a little bit on the bass side here and a relatively slow amount. Again, let's gain match these. And I really like how this setting affects the lower frequencies. sounds nice to me. It makes the lower frequencies a little bit thicker. Now with this setting, the difference is much bigger in my opinion. Yeah, I really like this plugin. And so yeah, that's it for this video, and I hope you learned something and you like this little plugin showcase here. And if so, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and thank you very much for watching, and see you on the next one. Bye.